Thank you to the Loft, the Jerome Foundation, and the Loft members who have allowed me to participate in this program. It has been a year of synthesis in the art and challenges of writing. It's brought together years of study in the MFA program at Hamlin and the guidance of the mentors in this program, Diego Vasquez, Kyle Kalia Yang, Matt Rasmussen, and this weekend, Ru Freeman. Thank you to all the teachers and mentors who have so graciously given me their time and expertise. I am fortunate to live and write in such a vibrant literary community. I want to acknowledge the support given to me this year by the fiction writers in the mentor group. Rebecca, Mary, and Carla, you are amazing writers, and I learn from you every time I read your words. Thank you to my circle of writing friends and my friends who support writing. Your encouragement and advice sustain me and strengthen my prose. I'm honored you took time out of your busy days to join me here tonight. A special shout out to my brothers and dad, the farmers and ranchers in my life. Their guidance and fact-checking have been critical to the details of this and other manuscripts. A few weeks ago, when I was working on this manuscript I'm going to read tonight, my brother Rory called me, and he, instead of saying hello, said, "You must not be farming today. I haven't heard from you." I'm grateful for their time and their patience. And finally, a huge thank you to my family, Chuck, Alexa, and Zach. You've put up with a lot, but never once suggested I quit. When I write, my characters become very real to me, and I hold them close, near my heart. Public speaking makes me quite nervous, but I find it exciting to introduce these characters to the world, and today I will introduce you to Katrina. Katrina is a 36-year-old woman whose father, Fritz Colgan, has recently suffered a stroke. In this excerpt from my novel, she's trying to determine what she's going to do about her dad's farming operation in northwestern North Dakota. The title of this chapter is What the Wind Knows. The wind whistled white noise against Katrina's ears, a tone both impatient and persistent, a wind that would have snapped the sheets on the clothesline if people still did that sort of thing. She leaned her forearms on the top board of the corral, rested one foot on the bottom board, and watched two black Angus bulls in the pen. The manure smelled damp, clinging to a season of snowmelt. The younger bull was pulling hay from a feeder with short jerks of his head and then working it over with his lower jaw, taking on the calories to develop a more mature muscle bulk. The older bull stood quietly in the spring sun, absorbing the low voltage rays into a scruffy hide chilled by winter. The animals had become her responsibility. It was too early to put them out in the pasture with the cows, but someone would need to haul them out when the time was right, whenever that was. That's what made her idea of returning to North Dakota for a season, to plant her dad's crop and harvest it, teeter toward ridiculous. What did she know about farming? Nothing in specific enough detail to be of value. She would have to resign from her job at Summit Health Services, logically a bad idea. The position had upward potential, paid decently, and there was no telling what she would find when she went back to Minnesota. However, a part of her head, the part hot-wired to her gut, told her that change of scene would be welcome. Too many at Summit knew too much. Condolences on Bailey's death were mixed with their unspoken questions of how do you grieve for a husband who was having an affair. Maybe she was running again. After high school, she had left behind a rural community's collective memory, the connections of family name and quarters of land, traditions and tragedies. Her mother's suicide had affixed a tag not easily forgotten. Only this time, she would be running back to the place where she had run from in the first place. Was it the symmetry of a completed circle or a rut she couldn't break from? Somewhere nearby, a meadowlark's call cut across the howl of wind. Her mother had always hated the wind, said it made her feel alone. More alone than anyone feels naturally, 3 miles from your nearest neighbor, she had said. That ought to tell you something. Katrina wished in a vague way that had no real expectation that the wind would tell her something. She could deal with the wind's bluster. Her hair was a single braid, angled across the back of her head and down the left side of her neck. But a few answers would be welcome, even if she couldn't articulate the questions. If the prairie had a voice, it would be the wind, where much was thought but little said. A landscape where people were sparsely scattered and Scandinavian stoicism thickly bred. In Katrina's experience, the prairie kept silent about a great many things. Cumulus clouds, boiling puffs, brushed gray on their bottoms and sun-dappled across the top, scuttled against the sky, pushing east. Some were no more than a trail of smoke, seemingly fragile, but able to be pushed hard and still retain their boundaries. Sometimes things were more substantial than they appeared. If she were to come home, she would have to be able to do the work. Intentions don't matter if the work doesn't get done, her dad had often said. She wasn't big, 5'1" on a determined day, and a woman. It would raise a few eyebrows, even with her dad. Katrina pressed her finger against the V-notched scar on her right forearm. She'd had the scar a long time, since she was 14. It had been late in the summer before starting high school, a time when she had been carrying both the effervescence of excitement and the sludge of dread in her veins. Her mother was canning a lug of Alberta peaches. When her dad came in to tell them he was heading out to fix fence, Katrina had jumped on the excuse to escape peeling peaches. "You should have stayed with your mother," Fritz said, the wind rushing through the pickup's open windows, pushing the day's dense accumulated heat from the vehicle. "Mom said it was fine for me to go." "You know you won't be a farmer," Fritz said. "Maybe someday you'll be glad you know how to can peaches." Katrina's stomach flipped, as if her feet had just slid out from beneath her. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes a person has to be practical. Girls don't grow up and fix fences." Fritz was driving steadily, watching the road in front of them. "Someday you might want to know how to can peaches." "But I like to be outside." "There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe you'll have a garden someday." Katrina squinted at him. "And can tomatoes?" "If you want." Her dad's voice was utterly reasonable. "I appreciate your help. You have a good sense with cows. You know how to walk through a herd and not rile them. But it's time to start thinking about your future, and it's not going to include fixing fence and plowing dirt." Later that day, when Katrina was placing the end of a section of busted barbed wire in the wire stretcher, her fingers slipped inside her two large leather gloves, and the wire got away from her. It snarled around in a twisted arc, a barbed end notching the V on the back of her arm. Katrina pressed her lips tight. After she wrestled the two cut ends into the wire stretcher and her dad began ratcheting the two broken sections together, she swiped the blood off on her jeans. Her dad had said nothing of the injury. Katrina had not spoken of it either. Katrina poked at the raised flesh of the scar. Maybe her dad had been wrong. Maybe she could plow dirt. She knew how to work a clutch. She pushed away from the corral. There was one way to find out. Katrina took her dad's pickup and the operating manual for the versatile 435 tractor. She waited at the end of the driveway for a semi hauling an oil tank to pass, gravel dust kicking up from dual wheels and forming a dirty mustard tunnel behind it. Katrina rolled up her window and waited for the wind to push the dust cloud across the farm's yard. Across the road, her dad had leaned a sign made from a large piece of plywood against a sawhorse. The sign read in hand-drawn letters, "Slow down," and beneath that, "Please." Fritz had gone directly from the field where he had been seeding to the hospital. Katrina found the tractor and drills on the quarter that ran along the slough water Scott Reese had offered to buy. If she sold the slough water, they would lay portable pipe, maybe 3 miles worth, between the slough and the frack site. Reese had told her that the water level of the slough would not decrease significantly. She wasn't sure if she could believe him. The red tractor gleamed in the sun. Hooked behind the tractor was an air drill, a 50-foot wide expanse of cultivator shanks that plowed seed into the soil, followed by a compartmentalized metal bin holding seed and fertilizer. A mass of writhing black hoses stretched between the two sections. An anhydrous ammonia tank, looking like a white capsule on wheels, completed the train. Katrina drove into the field and parked next to the seeding rig. She walked around it. The tractor was worth at least $250,000. She wasn't sure about the air drills, but the snarl of hoses and technology increased the thump in her heart. The shanks had been pulled out of the dirt. Good. She didn't want to be dropping seed and fertilizer. She wasn't sure about the anhydrous, but figured doing nothing was better than risking a lungful of lethal anhydrous. She laid her hand on one of the tractor's wheels, the tread as wide as the expanse of her palm, the dual wheels arching above her, and she felt tiny. A large expanse of dirt beneath the tractor's ladder was trampled flat. Her dad had not climbed down and easily walked away. Katrina sucked in a deep breath and pushed it out. She tucked the tractor manual under her armpit, placed her foot on the bottom rung of the ladder, and pulled herself up using the steel handle. Inside the cab, the leather seat and electronic gauges appeared to be that of an oversized pickup. She told herself that anyway. The seat swiveled side to side and sat too high to be comfortable. She fumbled with seat levers, eventually resorting to the operator's manual. Oh God, even the seat had an order of operation. Katrina turned to the page in the manual titled Tractor Startup and Engine Operation. Step 1, fasten your seatbelt. Katrina ignored that one. Step 2, put the transmission in neutral. There were two orange-knobbed transmission sticks on the right console, both with the H-shaped tracks of a standard transmission. One controlled the gear, low, medium, high, and reverse. The other, the speeds within each gear, 1, 2, 3, or 4. She moved both to the neutral position, the crossbar and the H. Step 3, set the engine throttle to the lowest position. The engine throttle was a rectangular lever on the right console, about 2 fingers wide and a ½ inch tall, a size disrespectful to the engine's speed it controlled. Alongside the lever was a graduated line, a picture of a rabbit at the wide top, a turtle at the narrow bottom. Katrina slid the lever back to turtle. Turtle felt good. Step 4, turn the ignition to run to activate the electrical accessories. Observe the warning lamps to be sure they are functioning. She turned the key in the ignition to run, and a lurking computer lit the electronic console like the panel of an aircraft in a space movie. The possibility of doing damage escalated. She took in more air, but the breaths were shallow. Step 5, engaged the clutch pedal. She pushed down on the clutch pedal with a leg that was suddenly become shaky and gripped the steering wheel with her left hand to keep the clutch firmly depressed. Step 6, turn the ignition to start position, to crank the engine, and release when the engine starts. Katrina closed her eyes, swallowed, then opened her eyes and turned the ignition key. The big diesel rumbled momentarily, then quickened as the engine started, the massive horsepower alive in the steering wheel beneath her hand. She sucked in a few breaths of air. Time to shit or get off the pot. She shifted the transmission to medium range, speed at 2. She pushed the throttle upwards toward rabbit while she released the clutch. The strength of the rebound in the clutch took her still shaky leg by surprise and it pushed past her resistance. The engine coughed and died. Fuck. Katrina rammed the clutch back down and started over. This time when the clutch came up, she was ready for the rebound, and she was pressing firmly forward on the throttle. The tractor lurched ahead. Katrina tapped up on the throttle. The RPMs on the gauge in front of her read 1,600. Not fast, but moving. She looked behind her. The drills and anhydrous tank appeared to be coming along fine. The insulated cab muffled the throb of the diesel engine to a low-pitched hum. As she approached the end of the field, she pressed down on the decelerator pedal with her foot, cutting the engine speed down without adjusting the throttle. She swung wide on the turn and realized she'd started turning too late. She cranked the steering wheel. The front axle pivoted independent of the back wheels. Holy shit, now the turn was too tight. Afraid the front wheels would ram the back tires, she spun the steering wheel back. Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, the end of the drills plunged past the edge of the field and into the ditch. The shanks bounced low, ripping through tangled grass, but then lurched back into the field. When she was heading back the way she came, she released the decelerator pedal. The engine returned to its original speed. She sucked in a deep breath and scanned the prairie for witnesses. A pheasant rooster scurried out from the edge of the slough and took off on a slow climbing flight. Katrina tapped the throttle up, chasing the rabbit. This wasn't time to be a chicken shit turtle. Coming home Coming home meant taking it all on: the farming, the cattle, the damn question of whether or not to sell the slough water, and the throb of memories that rode closer to her skin when she was here. Suicide burned a hole in bystanders, fast and deep. Katrina could still feel the dark cavity, the place where her mother had gone missing. But she couldn't picture her mother now, the way she would have aged, the way she would have adjusted to a life lived. Katrina practiced several more rounds in the field, gathering the feel of the machine beneath her hands. She returned the tractor to its original location and shut it down. She closed the manual and opened the door of the cab. The wind whistled in, cool against the wetness on her cheeks. Thank you.